Imagine this: the thunderous roar of thousands of spectators, the clashing of steel on steel, and the deafening silence that follows each brutal blow. The Colosseum, Rome's most iconic monument, is not just stone and history, it's a graveyard for countless souls. Gladiators, men once feared, revered, and ultimately forgotten. But there's a truth that history hides from us, a truth far darker than we can imagine, buried under centuries of myths and glorified legends. These men weren't heroes. They weren't warriors seeking glory. They were slaves, criminals, and prisoners of war, forced to fight not for fame or honor, but for survival, to entertain an empire that thrived on bloodshed, to fulfill the twisted desires of a society that found joy in violence. Every battle they fought was a battle against death. Each victory was not a triumph, but a mere delay, a temporary reprieve from the grim fate that awaited them in the next fight. And yet even death in the arena didn't guarantee freedom. The gladiators' real fight wasn't just against their opponents. It was against the very system that kept them chained. Behind every gladiator's tale lies a chilling truth, one of brutal training, oppressive control, and a society built on their suffering. Rome wasn't just a mighty empire, it was a machine that ground its own citizens into dust for sport. These men were not just fighters, they were the product of an empire that valued entertainment more than humanity. So, what was the real life of a gladiator? And what was the true cost of Rome's bloodiest games? Prepare to uncover the dark, hidden truth behind the gladiators of ancient Rome, a story of fear, cruelty, and survival that the history books never told. Welcome to Our History Book. Gladiators weren't born for battle, they were captured. Rome's relentless expansion led to the capture of thousands of men from foreign lands. These men, often from conquered tribes or rebellious regions, were torn from their families and sent to the ludi, gladiatorial training schools, where they would be transformed into instruments of Rome's brutal entertainment. The pattern was shared all over the world for millions of years from many, many different cultures. Some were criminals, sentenced to fight for their lives. Others were skilled warriors, captured and forced into a world of endless violence. But none of them had a say in their fate. Whether they were slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war, their destiny was sealed the moment they were taken by Roman forces. Inside the ludi, life was hellish. Gladiators were treated as nothing more than property. They were confined to small, cramped quarters, chained to one another in isolation, with little food and no escape. Their bodies were commodities, their pain an afterthought. Training was unforgiving. Gladiators were pushed to the limits of human endurance. The lanistae, the owners of the schools, cared only about profits, not the men who fought for their games. Punishments were harsh for those who didn't meet expectations. Whips cracked across their backs, and hours of grueling exercises followed any perceived failure. The Colosseum was more than just a structure. It was a symbol of Rome's might and cruelty. Thousands packed the stands to watch the gladiators fight, but for these warriors, the arena was a death sentence. It was not a place of honor, but of sheer brutality. Gladiators fought not for glory, but for survival, and their only opponent was death itself. Victory didn't mean freedom, only the chance to fight another day. Gladiators were forced to battle beasts, other gladiators, and sometimes both at once. Some even fought in mock naval battles, submerged in the arena, fighting for their lives while drowning under the weight of their own terror. The fate of these men was in the hands of the crowd. The editor, the organizer of the games, held the power to decide if a gladiator lived or died. A thumbs up meant life. A thumbs down meant death. The gladiators didn't fight for honor. They fought for their lives, while the crowd demanded blood. The gladiatorial games were not just a form of entertainment. They were a political tool. Roman emperors and politicians used these brutal spectacles to maintain control over the people. The games distracted from political unrest, military defeats, and economic struggles. They were a method of control, keeping the citizens pacified with violence. Gladiatorial games were often sponsored by the wealthy elite, including senators and generals, who saw them as a means to gain popularity with the masses. It wasn't just about bloodshed, it was about power. The games were part of a broader system of patronage that kept the political elite at the top, distracting the people with spectacle while they held their own positions of power. Some gladiators became famous, celebrated as heroes admired by the Roman public. These men, known for their skill and bravery in the arena, gained fame that rivaled that of emperors. Their names were immortalized in songs, poems, and public inscriptions. But even fame came with a price. Famous gladiators may have been treated better than their less renowned peers, but they were still slaves. Their lives were controlled by their masters, and their fame didn't guarantee freedom. Some sought to use their fame for a better life, but most were trapped in a never-ending cycle of violence. Even if they were granted freedom, they were often left without the means to survive outside the arena. While the physical scars of combat were evident, the mental scars were far deeper. Gladiators suffered from what we now understand as PTSD, constant violence, the loss of comrades, the terror of knowing that death was always a possibility. It shattered their minds. The mental toll was often overlooked in a society that valued strength and power above all. Some gladiators turned to alcohol or gambling as a way to cope with their trauma. Others became violent, lashing out in an attempt to regain some control over their lives. But for most, the psychological damage remained. Even those who survived the arena were broken inside, haunted by the sounds of battle and the faces of the men they had killed. Some gladiators refused to accept their fate. The most famous rebellion was led by Spartacus, a gladiator who escaped from the Ludi and formed an army of slaves and gladiators. They fought not only for their lives, but for their freedom, challenging the very system that oppressed them. Spartacus's revolt shook the Roman Empire to its core. While his rebellion was eventually crushed, it revealed the deep-seated anger and desperation that festered among the gladiators and slaves. For the first time, the powerful empire saw that these men, once thought of as mere objects of entertainment, were capable of resistance, of rebellion, and of taking their freedom back. By the end of the 5th century, the games began to fall out of favor. The rise of Christianity condemned the brutal bloodshed in the arena, and as the Roman Empire crumbled, so did the tradition of gladiatorial combat. The Colosseum fell into disrepair, but the legacy of the gladiators remained a dark chapter in Rome's history. Today, the Colosseum stands as a haunting reminder of the bloodshed that once took place within its walls. Gladiators, heroes in the eyes of the public, but broken men beneath it, left behind a legacy of suffering and violence. Their stories are a chilling reminder of how entertainment was built on the lives of those forced to fight for their survival. Thank you for joining us on Our History Book as we uncover the forgotten truths of the past. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories from history's darkest corners.